Cleetus McFarland has mentioned as a possibility of joining the Kaulig Truck Series team in 2026, and NASCAR continues having discussions about changing the playoff format in 2026. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and our motorsports story discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them straight really quickly. We're just going to take a look at some paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just show them straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ty Dillon's 2025 C-Best scheme that we'll see this weekend at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Honestly, I like the scheme quite a bit, to be honest. I think Kaulig Racing knocked this one out of the park. They did a really good job on this one. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at New Hampshire. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Noah Gragson's 2025 Farm Rich scheme that we'll see this weekend at New Hampshire. Honestly, I think the scheme's okay in my opinion. I do like the Farm Rich is stepping up and sponsoring Noah Gragson once again this season. It does look really good. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at New Hampshire. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2025 Hayek Motorsports scheme that we'll see this weekend at New Hampshire. It's kind of impressive to see that they've been able to go most seasons without having to use their own team's name, but the team does have a lot of money behind him. The scheme looks okay in my opinion. It's definitely interesting for sure. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Bilicki's 2025 Plan B sales scheme that we'll see in a couple weeks at the Charlotte Roval. Honestly, I like the scheme quite a bit, to be honest. I love the simplicity of it. I think that Nice Motorsports actually did a pretty solid job on this one. We're looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at the Charlotte Roval. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Todd Gilliland's 2025 Gorilla Snowman scheme that we'll see this weekend at New Hampshire. Honestly, I think the scheme's okay. It's not fantastic by any stretch of imagination. Just got a new snowman look to the car. It's okay, but it's not the best scheme that I think the team's released so far. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Connor Mosak's 2025 Web scheme that I believe we're going to see this weekend at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. I'll be honest, I think the scheme actually looks pretty good in my opinion. I do like the simplicity of the scheme overall. I like the white, I like the red. It mixes pretty well on this truck. I think McAnally did a pretty good job on this scheme. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the New Hampshire purse money for this weekend. So every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockets puts out the purse money for the event. And according to Bob, for the Cup race is $9,797,935, and for the Truck race is $782,900. Truck Series teams have increased the purse money a little bit from prior weeks, but they're still having a lot of issues when it comes to the purse money. They should probably be having at least over $1 million at this point. For Cup, it's down a little bit because of course, you have the lawsuit going on where all the 2011 and front row teams don't get to have any of that charter money anymore, and all the charter teams, which I believe there's no new teams showing up with only 36 cars being on the track this weekend. That purse has gone down a little bit. It's decent purse money for Cup, but it's not great for Trucks. I wish the Trucks purse money was a little bit more, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jockey. As it was confirmed earlier this evening that Jockey will sponsor Shane Van Gisbergen in the NASCAR Cup Series race this weekend at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Jockey's been a sponsor with Trackhouse Racing since around the 2022 season. They sponsor Ross Chastain quite a bit. They sponsored Daniel Suarez for a few races. And now for the first time, Jockey will sponsor Shane Van Gisbergen this weekend. Honestly, I do like the simplicity of the car, but I know that there's some people that are not going to be the biggest fan of it. But it's nice to see him picking up a new sponsor for this week. And obviously, Red Bull and WeatherTech have been very much associated with SVG and Connor Zilisch so far this year. But now we're going to see him in a Jockey car this weekend. I honestly like the car quite a bit, to be honest. I do think it's good. I love the simplicity in some way, shape, or form. It does look alright, and I think it'll be a nice car for fans going out the track. It does look decent. I think they did a pretty decent job on it overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Formula One. As it was announced a couple days ago, the Formula One has announced the sprint races for 2026, and there are going to be 6 of them in the 2026 season. The first one will take place at Shanghai, which is the Chinese Grand Prix. Then you have the Miami Grand Prix, which will have the Miami version of that. Then they'll have Silverstone for the UK GP, the British Grand Prix. Then the Canadian GP will have a sprint race in Montreal. Then the Dutch Grand Prix will have one with Zandvoort, and then finally, the last one will be the Singapore Grand Prix, of course, at Singapore. So there's going to be 6 sprint races of the 24-25 races that take place. I think there's some tracks that host a sprint race better than others, to be honest. I think that some of them will probably put on a decent show, but obviously we got to get a better car, which of course the new regulations coming in next year. So hopefully with that, we'll get better racing overall in 2026 in Formula One. I think we're waiting to see how the racing exactly is going to be next season, but I do like the fact that some of the tracks you're using in Miami is honestly a really good track when it comes to the racing. racing product, so I think we could get a decent one there for sure. Nonetheless, it's good to see we know what the sprint races are going to be next year, and glad to see we have an official confirmation on that as more starts to get announced for Formula One going forward into the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joe Gibbs Racing. As was reported by the NASCAR Insights account, I believe on Monday afternoon, that Joe Gibbs Racing became the first team in NASCAR Cup Series history to lead 10,000 laps in the next-gen era. Hampshire Motorsports is not that far away from reaching 10,000 laps. I think they're at like 9,700 laps, I'm pretty sure, led in the next-gen era. And very likely in the coming weeks, they're going to reach 10,000 laps as well. But Joe Gibbs Racing's obviously had an amazing season so far, 2025. And he looked to continue trying to do that and get their first championship, I believe, in the next-gen era. I don't think they've won a championship in the next-gen era so far. So looking to get that done this year. But I think they've had a fantastic year. And to have 10,000 laps led in the next-gen era is impressive. Surprised that Hendrick Motorsports hasn't reached that at this point, but I don't think it'll be long before Hendrick gets there. I think they're going to get there soon, and I think that they'll be very successful going forward in the future. Pretty impressive to see them, though, lead 10,000 laps in the next-gen era up to this point so far. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Derek White. As it was confirmed a couple days ago, I believe on Monday, that Derek White will drive the number 69 for NBM Motorsports this weekend in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. I believe Derek White has made one or two starts in the Craftsman Truck Series so far in 2025. He's made Cup Series starts here. I'm pretty sure he's also ran here in the Xfinity Series as well. So he has a little bit of experience racing at this track before. I think Derek White won't probably have a lot of speed, unfortunately, because you look at the truckies in NBM Motorsports, while they're a team that's still trying to build up their program and get better in the lower series, I just don't have the confidence that Derek White is going to be a factor in any way, shape, or form. Hopefully I am wrong and he can have a really good opportunity here with NBM, but they just haven't had the speed when they've been out on the track. I know Tyler Tomasi, we're going to talk about just a little bit, has been decent with this team so far when he's ran, but I do think that Derek's going to struggle a bit. I don't think he's going to have the consistent pace and speed. I don't think it'll be a factor. It might be a struggle for him this weekend at New Hampshire. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tyler Tomasi. As it was announced on Monday that Tyler Tomasi will drive the number 33 truck for Rayon Brothers Racing this weekend at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Tyler Tomasi's made a lot of starts in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series so far this year. He's scheduled to run in the number 69 truck in a couple weeks at Talladega Super Speedway and has made quite a few starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series as well. I think Tyler is a very talented driver. He's been very underrated in some of this equipment and someone, in my opinion, who could surprise a lot of people this weekend at New Hampshire with a decent run. He's driving the same truck that Frankie Muniz has driven all year. We all know, of course, Frankie Muniz is not eligible to return at this point, may not return before the end of the year with the injuries he suffered, unfortunately, but we'll see what happens on that front going forward into the future. But for Tyler, it's a good opportunity. I hope he does get an opportunity to go full-time in the future and with a decent team at this point. Who knows if that will happen? That's going to be determined on what happens on that front going forward in the near future, but because Tyler does have some races scheduled, like I said, for the end of the year, we'll see if he does get those opportunities in the near future, gets to compete in a series not too far down the road, but good to see he'll get the chance and opportunity to race with Rayon Brothers this weekend at New Hampshire. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Canadian Grand Prix. As it was reported by multiple reporters in the Formula One industry that the Canadian Grand Prix will not clash with the Indy 500 in 2026. The race will be scheduled for 4 p.m. Canadian time, which will be after the Indy 500 more than likely completes. I believe they run in either Eastern Standard Time or Central Standard Time when their races do end up taking place. I think they usually have it around 2 to 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. By that point, the Indy 500 should be concluded at that particular moment, unless rain does become a factor. Say what you want to say about Formula One. When they announced that they were going to be moving the race away from Monaco and putting the Canadian Grand Prix in initially, I was very much against this move because no disrespect to the Canadian Grand Prix, but the Indy 500 is the biggest race in the world. And going up against the Indy 500 would be an insane move by Formula One. I am glad they have come to realize that the Canadian Grand Prix, while yes, it is a big event for Formula One, you cannot go against Indianapolis 500. So how it's going to work next year is the Indy 500 is going to be the first race in the morning, morning/going into early afternoon. Then you're going to have the Canadian Grand Prix at around 2 Central Time. And then, of course, you'll have the Coke 600, which will take place at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I think this actually is a really good change in my opinion, and I'm glad to see they finally come to the realization, like I said, that they're not going to be clashing with the Indianapolis 500. I think it makes no sense to clash with that event. You don't want to clash with how big of an event it is, and if you clash with it, you're going to have a lot of fans that are mad and angry, considering your ratings are not going to be very good as it is, with there not being probably any good ratings coming out from the Canadian GP, with race course going likely to Apple next year with the new Formula 1 contract that's coming very soon. Very interesting stuff nonetheless for sure though, but I think it's a really good move in my opinion, really exciting stuff, and glad to see that they've made the right decision here. I think it was wrong to move the Canadian Grand Prix earlier in the year. They moved Monaco later in the season, but I think they made the right decision and right call to go ahead and move the Canadian Grand Prix to later in the afternoon. I think it's the best decision you can make for Formula 1 in my opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Richard Childress. Now, usually I don't go political on this channel as I try to avoid politics quite a bit. There's a report that came out from Fox News very recently, and we all know that Richard Childress and RCR had a Charlie Kirk memorial decal, I believe, on the side of either Austin Hill's car or Austin Dillon's car for the weekend at Bristol. Many people have been wondering who made the decision to go ahead and put that on there. Well, it was confirmed from Richard Childress when he went on Fox and Friends a couple days ago that it was his decision to put the Charlie Kirk sticker on the car. To be honest, I'm not shocked and surprised about this, considering we know what Richard Childress does. He's gotten involved in politics quite a bit, and Richard Childress doesn't really care about a lot of things at this point. While I think it's respectful what he did, I think Richard Childress probably should focus a little bit more on trying to make sure his cars go faster and trying to get the equipment up than what happened. But nonetheless, I think it's still cool that he did it, but at the same token, at the same time, politics are not a thing that need to be fully involved in NASCAR fully at this moment, but at the same token, at the same time, I think it was respectful what they did. And there was, of course, a lot of memorials. You saw Chris Bell said that one was for Charlie when he won the race. Obviously, Bristol Motor Speedway SMI did a little bit of memorial up, I think, on the top TV they have there, I'm pretty sure. So it was interesting stuff nonetheless, and pretty interesting that we know who made the decision. It just wasn't surprising and shocking because we kind of expect that when something like that happens, and political stuff comes in, Richard Childress is the one who makes a big decision on that. So I'm not surprised to see that, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Let's Go Brandon, also known as LGB Coin. As Bob Pockers reported, I believe, on Monday, that apparently the trial for the Let's Go Brandon coin could begin at some point this week, potentially by the end of the week at this moment in time. Now, this comes from the founder, some guy named James, I'm pretty sure, who founded the coin, was supposed to have a coin in sponsorship for Brandon Brown, I believe, for the 2022 season. On that same day, NASCAR pretty much confirmed that we are not going to allow political sponsorships in the sport in any major way. We used to allow that a lot more, but now we're not allowing political sponsors and meme coins or anything like that fully in the sport at this point. The owner of the coin basically sued NASCAR at that point, and they're having a trial on that currently at the moment. And there's a lot of money that apparently they owe a lot of people, including Brandon Brown as well. This situation, unfortunately, kind of hurt Brandon Brown's career, sadly. I know a lot of people like to blame Brandon Brown for that situation and what happened a couple years back, but Brandon Brown was not the one who made the decision with the organization. His father, Jerry Brown, I believe is who it is, who owns the organization. He was one who made the decision, which is a big reason why Chris Wright, which we'll get to in just a little bit, would end up being the driver and a major reason why the organization would shut down later in 2022. Brandon would start the season and get a few starts with the team, but wouldn't run the whole entire season, unfortunately, at that point. This trial is definitely going to be very interesting for sure. We'll see how the trial ends up going. I don't really see them winning the trial, to be honest, because there's a lot of evidence that's going to go against them. We'll see what happens, though, but we'll see how things go on the trial. But like I said, I'm not expecting the trial to go very well for the owner of the coin. I think it's going to be very tough for them to win that suit overall, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rico Abreu. As it was confirmed earlier today, some massive bombshell news in the dirt world as it was announced that Tony Stewart Racing will be going to high limit racing full-time starting in the 2026 season. And Rico Abreu, who's been racing in high limits so far this year quite a bit, will be the driver of that car. This is a really, really big deal. Obviously, Tony Stewart Racing joining up in the High Limit Series, which is the fastest growing dirt series currently at the moment in the country. This is a really, really big deal for that because have the name of Tony Stewart, who is involved in the NHRA, winning a lot of NHRA races, having one of the most successful dirt teams in the last 25 years come in, who's won a lot of World of Outlaws championships with Donnie Schatz and won a lot of races, other drivers in the organization. I think this is a massive, massive deal for the dirt world in general, and it just shows that high limit racing is growing. And you think about World of Outlaws, where World of Outlaws is doing things in their own way, and I respect the way they're doing things at this point. You have to adapt to some point, and high limit racing is finding a way to adapt. Their purses are a lot better than how the World of Outlaws is doing it currently at the moment, and I think you look at some of the moves and some of the personnel that making the moves to other series, and I think there's a big reason for that. You get more pay, there's a lot more better to come out of something like this, and I think for Rico Abreu, you look at what he's been doing in high limit, winning race in high limit this year. You look at the drivers who've transitioned over to high limit like Casey Kane in recent years, and a lot of drivers who continue to move over to the high limit racing series and how much it's growing right now. I think this won't be the end of it. I think you're going to continue seeing more drivers go from the World of Outlaws high limit, and I think the World of Outlaws is going to have to adapt and change some things, whether it's like TV coverage, having it on dirt vision doesn't help. There's not as many people that have dirt vision compared to how flow racing is. I just look at high limit and what they're doing, and a lot of things they're doing are very, very positive. What Kyle Larson, Brad Sweet have done is absolutely incredible. They're building an empire. They're building a big force toward their long-term future of the series, and to me, I love what I'm seeing from the high limit series. There's a lot of really good things coming out about it, and I think there's a lot of fun things that are coming also in the near future about it, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR 25. Now, we have a couple things around NASCAR 25 that have gotten revealed over the course of the last couple days. It was confirmed on Monday that NASCAR 25 will be coming to SEMA officially on November 11th and will come to PC in the middle of November. Also earlier today, they released a hype trailer in regards to the gameplay trailer that is expected to be released at some point today by the time many of you are watching this video. I gotta say, looking at the hype trailer, while yes, we have seen a lot of hype trailers around this game, I think this actually looks really good. And if the game actually does look like this, and I think it could potentially look like this, I think this game could end up being really good, but looks can only take you so far. The big thing for most people, including myself, and I've said this time and time again, we're waiting for the gameplay to be released. I think that will get a lot of people the opportunity to see how the game is going to end up being played. And I think it could potentially be a really successful game as well. And I really hope it is, because we haven't had a really good NASCAR video game in a long time. The last game that I would say was actually really good was NASCAR The Game Inside Line. Remember, that game came out in 2012. It's been nearly 13 years. In fact, it's been 13 years since that game has released. So you need to have a good game in general, in my opinion, for NASCAR to get that younger demographic. That's something that NASCAR has been chasing, is that younger demographic. If you can get that younger demographic to be involved in your sport, I think that can be a big deal long-term as well. So I'm excited about that. Obviously, you got William Byron, Christopher Bell, and Ryan Blaney on the cover, which makes a lot of sense. Three of the drivers who are big in your sport right now being involved in it. And I think there's a lot of really good things that are going to be coming out about this game really soon. Of course, there's some disappointment about not having Bowman Gray in Mexico City in the game, among other tracks as well, along with some other stuff. But nonetheless, I think there's some really good stuff on the way for NASCAR 25. I think some of that is going to get revealed here very soon, including a trailer, which many of you will be seeing at some point later today. Some really exciting, great stuff around that. Pretty cool stuff overall in general, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jeff Stankiewicz. As it was announced on Monday that Jeff Stankiewicz has officially parted ways with CR7 Motorsports and is no longer the crew chief for Grant Enfinger throughout the remainder of the 2025 season. Michael Shelton, who originally planned to crew chief the number 97 truck for this weekend with Carson Quaffle driving, that 97 truck is withdrawn from the Truck Series race at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, and Michael Shelton, who is the general manager of the program, will be the crew chief for Grant Enfinger throughout the remainder of the 2025 season. This is really disappointing here because, in my opinion, Jeff Stankiewicz is a really talented crew chief. He's won some races, of course, in the Craftsman Truck Series. He won a championship with Sheldon Creed back in 2020, and he's been in a crew chief for quite some time and has gotten wins at Grant Enfinger over the course of the last couple of years. But it is no secret that CR7 Motorsports this year has taken a little bit of a step backwards. And while, yes, I think that Jeff has played a little bit of part in that, maybe the team not being as strong, I can't really say that CR7 Motorsports, the biggest reason the team's been fumbling a bit, is because of Jeff Sinkowitz. I think that Jeff and Grant have had a really good and pretty fun working relationship over the last year or so, and it's disappointing to hear that he's no longer the crew chief for the organization and team. For Michael Shelton, he's got some crew chiefing experience, right? But I'm not sure that Michael Shelton's going to come in there and be better. I just don't know what this means for Grant Enfinger, because my understanding is Grant Enfinger is an expiring contract with CR7 Motorsports, and in my understanding, he's, as of now, not signed officially for 2026. Could that mean he's a potential candidate for the Kaulig racing team next year? That could potentially be a possibility, but we'll talk about some of the names. He wasn't mentioned as one of those names that could be a candidate for that at this time. So we're just going to have to wait and see on that front what's going to happen there. But for CR7 Motorsports, this is a disappointing decision. I don't agree with the decision fully. I get that they can make whatever decisions they need to make, but at this point, I don't think this is completely the right decision to make for them. I think they're making the wrong decision in some way, shape, or form. I get they want to make decisions they want to make, and it's fine and understandable. But like I said, I think that Jeff Sinkowitz is a solid crew chief, and I really hope he does find a job just like Rodney Childress, who in my opinion deserves to have a job but being a crew chief in the sport, which I think he could be Connor Zilisch's crew chief next year. Who knows at this point, but we'll see nonetheless what happens. But it's pretty interesting that Jeff Sinkowitz is no longer working with CR7 Motorsports for the remainder of this year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the award ceremony. As it was announced on Monday going into Tuesday that the award ceremony for NASCAR for 2025 is having some pretty big changes. It will take place a lot earlier this year compared to usual years. Usually the award ceremony happens in late November going into early December, but for 2025 it will take place on November 4th, 2 days after the championship is officially concluded on the Tuesday. It will take place also in Arizona as well. It will not be in Nashville this year. Instead, it will be in Scottsdale, Arizona. And according to what Bob Pockrass has reported, the only plan right now is to have only the championship four drivers, the four drivers who do make the championship four this year, for all three series showing up, and probably ARC as well showing up for that. There's been a lot of theories around this, and I will say the red carpet having the event live, I think, is actually a really good decision. I'm glad that NASCAR is making that move. But I have seen some people that have been very negative about this move and saying, why are they making this move in the first place? I have a really big theory around what exactly is going on here. My big theory is the lawsuit as a major part of this, because like I mentioned, usually the award ceremony takes place a little bit later in the year. But remember, December 1st is when the trial is supposed to begin. And there's not going to be a lot of time during that time, because the decision is not going to be final with this trial until probably the middle to late December. Because this trial is going to start on December 1st, right, between 2011 Front Row and NASCAR, which could have a big effect on some of those contracts for like Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace and Noah Gragson, Zane Smith, and all that. But I think this is a big reason why they're trying to get it done, and a lot of the stuff and end of year stuff done as quickly as possible. My big question is, how are they going to do the most popular driver award for all three series? Are they going to have that kind of started to work on as the season concludes, or are they going to make that decision basically after it gets over and they're not going to award that? Is it going to be a much quicker award ceremony? That is a big question as well. Nonetheless, it's not the most surprising move at this point with the award ceremony. I'm not shocked they're moving it up earlier again, because I think the big reason why they're making a decision as quick as they can is so they can get all this stuff done as soon as possible, and then of course can focus on trying to get prepared for the lawsuit, which is coming up really soon. We'll see what happens here really soon in regards to the awards ceremony, but it's still a big deal nonetheless in regards to this. And I think it's a big change that they made overall in general with the awards ceremony to move it up earlier. Again, they normally don't have it this early, but there's obviously a big reason why they made this change and the move they made. I'm not surprised that they moved it up a little earlier this year for the awards ceremony, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Bristol TV ratings from this past weekend at Bristol. And let's be honest, they're not very, very good. As it was reported by Adam Stern on a couple nights ago on Tuesday night, the USA got a 0.79 rating and 1.536 million viewers for Saturday night's race at Bristol. That is down from a 0.98 rating and 1.868 million viewers. That means that this race is down over 300,000 viewers from 2024. And while it's not as far down as I thought it was going to be, I'll be honest, I thought we were going to be in the 1.3 to 1.4 million range. That still is an awful number. This is the least watched Bristol night race on record since they started recording ratings back, I believe, in the 1980s, in the 1990s. This rating is absolutely unacceptable. To have only 1.5 million people tune in to your biggest event of the year, or at least one of your biggest events, which is the cutoff race of the playoffs, this number is not acceptable. And I think a lot of people are wondering exactly why are the ratings down and why they've been down double-digit numbers, because we have seen double-digit decreases for every single playoff race so far this year. Meanwhile, the other races leading up to, like Daytona and a couple other races prior, were up or even flat compared to the prior year. There's a few big reasons for it. People are going to say the NFL and the college football excuse. And while, yes, some of the college football games, like the Tennessee game, got 12 million viewers, I don't really think the football excuse is a big thing. I think the racing product plays a big role, though I will say, we'll talk about the tire here in just a short little bit. I don't really think the racing product was that bad. In fact, I thought the Bristol night race this year was one of the better Bristol races we've seen, at least with the next-gen car. Maybe the best we've ever seen, who knows at this point. But I think it was a really, really good race. But generally, the racing product this year in NASCAR, at least on the Cup Series side, has not been very good so far this year. There's also fatigue on talking about the lawsuit going on. I think people are tired of the playoff format. You notice that the 3 races we've seen or at least double-digit decreases, a lot of those have been playoff races. And I think playoffs play a major role in that. People are tired of the playoff format, and we'll talk about that again coming up really soon. I just think in general, when you look at the Bristol ratings, I think there's so much that goes in part with this. And I do think, again, the TV ratings do play a major part, because I think the playoff format plays a role in that. And I think there's a lot of other things that do play a major part in what exactly is going on. And I just think it's disappointing that we've been seeing decrease in ratings. And I don't think anything's going to change until the playoff format changes, until the racing product gets better, which it does sound like, and we'll talk about it here soon. But we continue hearing more and more about the playoff format, which I disagree with some of the things that were mentioned about potential Championship 6. Trust me, I'll get my thoughts on that here very, very shortly. But I got to say that I think that the race was good. It's a shame not a lot of people tuned in. But again, I think a lot of that has to do with the racing product as of late. And I think a lot of that has to do with people just being tired of the consistent playoff conversation. And I think the fatigue and how long the season is plays a major part in that also, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Bristol tire. Now, if you watch a NASCAR Cup Series race at Bristol Motor Speedway, you probably saw a fantastic and really good race that took place. A major reason for that was because of the Bristol tire, where of course they brought a tire that was expected to wear very, very quickly, and we saw a race very similar to what we saw in 2024 in the spring, where there was a ton of tire wear and there was a lot of fall off on the tire as well, which created a lot of chaos. But it also created an old school style Bristol race, except maybe there wasn't as much tire wear back then as there was in this event. Rudy Fiegel went on CR7 NASCAR radio, I believe it was on Monday, and basically speaks on the tire, basically asking, what is the goal of making Bristol really good? Or is our goal trying to be achieving causing more tire wear? Or are we trying to make a race that's really compelling and really exciting? What is our goal at this point? I do have to agree some of Rudy Fiegel on that a little bit, basically saying that I think the race itself, yes, was really entertaining and fun to watch. But I think there are some major issues, and I think that it is not just an issue with this next-gen car. I think we all know that generally the next-gen car does not race very well at short tracks. And the fact that the tire has to be very chaotic, and you have to go to a certain temperature, which is like 65 or 75 degrees central, basically Fahrenheit, on the track, basically a certain temperature where the tires are going to wear very frequently. If it's too cold, it's not going to wear at all. Then, of course, if you go too warm, it's not going to wear at all, because we saw during the practice sessions on Friday where basically there wasn't any wear at all that was taking place. Meanwhile, we went down a little cooler, and then basically we saw not a ton of tire. We saw a ton of fall off, and it was like very, very quick. I think that we all know that Bristol Motor Speedway itself is a very temperature-sensitive track, and it can wear very, very quickly with the tires depending on the temperature, among other things. We got to find a way to work on the next-gen car to make that to where the tire can wear not as quickly and can wear very equally across the whole entire run. But I think Bristol's a big problem too. We saw it during the Xfinity Series race and the Truck Series race. Tires didn't mean anything during those races at all. And the temperature is very similar to the Cup Series race. Very little tire wear taking place. Guys can stay out 100-plus lap tires, and they wouldn't fade through the field. Look at Eric Almirola. He set out at the end of the run on over 100 lap tires, went on to win the race. Corey Heim nearly won the Craftsman Truck Series race on Thursday night, despite the fact he had older tires and lane race and other drivers in the field. there's got to be changes at Bristol Motor Speedway in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a reconfiguration, whether that's going back to asphalt, whether that's going back to the old configuration of Bristol for 2007. I think that's something to look at, because if you have to have PJ1 on the track every single year, and if you don't apply it, the racing isn't good, because if you don't have that applied, it creates a top lane track that's top lane dominated. I think there's changes that do need to be made to the track itself, in my opinion, for the racing to get absolutely better than it is currently at the moment. I think you got to look at how the track is configured more than anything else at this moment for the racing absolutely to get better at this track going forward. So we'll see what happens whether NASCAR changes Bristol Motor Speedway in the future, but I think you got to look at that more than anything else as a big reason why Bristol may not put on as the best racing that it has at the moment right now, and I think it's just not the best racing at this track right now, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about IndyCar. As it was announced on Tuesday that the 2026 IndyCar schedule has been officially announced and confirmed. The IndyCar schedule will kick off on March 1st at St. Petersburg. Then it'll race at Phoenix for the first time, I believe, since 2019 on March 7th. After that, we'll race at Arlington on March 15th, the first time we're racing in the Arlington area on the streets. Then on March 29th, we'll race at Barber. That gets moved up a little bit earlier in the season compared to prior years. Then there will be only one race during the month of April with the Long Beach Grand Prix on April 19th. Then it will have the Indy Road Course race on May 9th, and then they'll have the Indy 500 on May 24th. Then you have the Streets of Detroit on May 31st, and then Gateway on June 7th, which once again, that will be a night race this upcoming season, and that will take place after, of course, the Cup race takes place, I believe, during that same day on June 7th. Then Road America will move to June 21st, and then Mid-Ohio is back during the 4th of July weekend on July the 5th. After that, a big change here. National Super Speedway moves from the season finale to July 19th. However, something big to note for this one, this will be a 400-mile race instead of a 300-mile race, so that gets extended another extra 100 miles, and that will be a 300-lap race taking place at Nashville, and it will take place when the World Cup is coming to a close. Then on August 7th, we'll race at Portland. Then we'll race the streets of Markham as a new replacement for Toronto on August 16th. Then there will be a doubleheader at Milwaukee on August 19th, 29th, and 30th in the Milwaukee track. And then Laguna Seca will be the season finale on September 6th. A couple big things to note here. Phoenix will be before the Xfinity Series race. It will be a Saturday afternoon event before the Xfinity Series race begins. I'm not a big fan of this move. I think it makes a lot more sense for Cup and basically Cup and IndyCar to be on the same day, but I digress, and I think it should be a night race after Xfinity includes, but I digress at this point. I do like the early move to have more races in the early portion of the schedule. I think that's the best thing that they've done in quite some time. One of the biggest issues I've had with IndyCar schedule for quite some time is the fact that they've had an issue with front-loading the schedule. They've done a really good job on that. That's a big crust that they've had for a while. Great to have a lot more races early. Another change I'm not a big fan of, Laguna Seca being the season finale. I gave my thoughts on this a couple days back. I really think Laguna Seca, while yes, it's a track that can put on decent racing from time to time, I think the most compelling race you need an oval to end the season, especially after how big the rating was at the end of the year for National, which had your third biggest rating of the season, only behind the St. Pete Grand Prix and the Indy 500. You would think that they would want to have the National race being late in the year. Obviously, weather's a big part in why they made this move, which, to be fair, at Laguna Seca, weather's not going to be a really big factor unless rain comes in out of nowhere, but I just don't like the fact that they've got a road course to end the season. That one I don't get, and that one I don't understand on a personal front, because I think it's a lot better when you have the race having an oval to end the year, because you could have had a true ending finale. Instead, you're just making this change where you're going to have a race like Laguna Seca that's probably not going to put on the best show consistently. So I'm not the biggest fan on that move personally, but I get why they're wanting to have it, the wine and dine factor. Overall, there's some positive changes with the schedule, but there's also a ton of negatives with the schedule. I'm not the biggest fan of the inconsistencies with the schedule for next year. Again, there's some good things for sure for next year's schedule, but personally, I think there's things they absolutely could have done a much better job on for sure. I think there's some things that I'm not the biggest fan of IndyCar schedule for next year. I wish there were more oval races on the schedule as well. Yes, you got Phoenix next year, but you have less oval races in 2026, which is something I'm not the biggest fan of, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Connor Zilisch. Now, we obviously know that Austin is going to be competing in the wild card event at the Adelaide finale for the Supercar event with Tickford Racing. But now we know there's another driver that's actually being linked to a potential Supercar race. That driver is Connor Zilisch. According to Speed Cafe and VA Sleuth as well, Connor Zilisch has been linked to a supercar start at the end of 2025 and could be also joining the wildcard event in the Chevrolet camp in 2025 as well. Let's go back to the Chevrolet side of things for this event, because we're not going to focus on Ford. But on the Chevy side of things, there's been two previous drivers who were linked to competing with the top Chevrolet team. Kyle Busch was linked in for a couple seasons of race at Gibbs Racing, I believe in 2023 and 2024, and it sounded like they were very close to having that deal signed for Kyle Busch to compete in that event, but obviously that deal unfortunately fell through, and that did not end up happening. Then, of course, you have Kyle Larson, and it seemed like we were very close to having Kyle Larson getting the chance and opportunity to compete in the events of Supercars, and he actually was about to announce a deal to compete in that event. Unfortunately, after a failed attempt at the double with the Indy 500 and the Co 600, where Kyle Larson crashed now out of not just the Indy 500, but the Coca-Cola 600 as well, Kyle Larson decided to deny the opportunity to do it, as he wanted to focus on trying to get back up front and be consistent as a driver in the NASCAR Cup Series after a failed double at that point. Again, like I mentioned, Austiner will compete with Take for Racing, but many of us have been wanting to see more of that crossover because we've seen a lot of drivers in Supercar world come over to NASCAR. Guys, of course, like Will Brown, Shane Van Gisbergen, who's had 5 career NASCAR Cup Series victories. Brock Feeney's come over, not Brock Feeney, but he's been rumored to be making starts in NASCAR in the future. We've seen Cam Waters come and run some truck races and a couple Cup Series races as well. And Brody Kosecki, not to mention, has competed, and Jack Perkins as well. And now it sounds like Connor Zilisch, according to this, is linked to be going over there. I didn't read the article too much, but it sounds like maybe Premier Air Racing might be the team he's going for, which I believe is a new top Chevrolet team, but I'm not entirely sure at this point. It would have to be a factory Camaro team. Now, obviously, a lot of people are going to be worried about the injuries, among other things, with Connor Zilisch, but I think it'd be amazing to see a guy like Connor Zilisch, who, in my opinion, is someone who absolutely could adapt and be very successful. Just look at what Connor Zilisch has done in the last year or so. He, of course, has won 9 NASCAR Xfinity Series races this season, which is the most we've seen since Noah Gragson in 2022, and he's driving that number 9 car. And he's been having an incredible run of races with 15 consecutive top 5 finishes, and came very close to becoming the first driver in Xfinity history to have 5 consecutive wins. He's on track to win his first Xfinity championship. He's won the Rolex 24 in the LMP2 class. He's won a Sebring 12 Hours in the LMP2 class. Was super fast at karting. He's been very successful. He's someone, in my opinion, who has a good opportunity in the near future to win a NASCAR Cup Series championship, depending on what happens in the long-term future of what happens with Trackhouse, whether that team gets out of speed or whether he ends up at Hendrick Motorsports in the near future, considering Alex Bowman's struggles as of late. I'm not sure how long Alex Bowman is going to be in the NASCAR Cup Series with Hendrick, and I think that they're going to try to poach Connor Zilisch over that program and keep him in the Chevrolet camp going forward, despite the fact he's got major links to Red Bull at this point. I think it'd be incredible to see Connor Zilisch go and compete in supercars. And of all the drivers who are really good at this racing and street cars and racing in road course and other things, who I think could go over there and do an extremely well job, I think Connor has the best chance and opportunity to be super fast and super successful and really, really good if he does go and run supercars. But then, of course, you worry about the injuries, among other things, which I think that Trackhouse would absolutely be prepared if they could have that happen. But I think it'd be amazing for something like that to happen. I actually hope it does happen, because I think it'd be fun to see a guy like Connor Zilisch, who has been extremely successful in everything he's competed in. And got to keep this in mind as well. He's only 19 years old. Imagine what he'll be like in 5 to 10 years. Imagine him being one of the most successful Cup drivers, and I think he's going to win a lot of Cup races. And I've got a really big take here. I think by the end of his NASCAR career, he'll have over 100 wins across all 3 series, because I think he's going to win some Truck Series races in the next couple of years, and I think he's going to win a lot more Xfinity races, and I think he's going to be starting to win some Cup races. Wouldn't even surprise me or shock me as a rookie next year if he does pick up a Cup win. But I would love to see Connor Zilisch go over and run a supercar race like we see in the crossover. See other guys like Chase Elliott, Bubba Wallace, Kyle Larson do it in the future. Kyle Busch, maybe have other people like a Ross Chastain go over. I think that'd be cool. Something like that could happen. Maybe get Scott McLaughlin to come over and do some NASCAR stuff as well, because I know he's been open to doing that. Who knows at this point? But nonetheless, I love that Connor has been linked to this, and I really hope he does get an opportunity to race in a supercar event going forward in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about the playoff format. Now, there has been a lot of talk about the championship format and what the playoff format can look like for 2026. A few months ago, there was a lot of talk that there was not going to be any sort of changes to the playoff format for the 2026 year, as Jeff Gluck did mention on the teardown back, I believe, in the middle to late regular season, that he said he was not expecting there to be any major changes to the playoff format for next year. But that sounds like that has changed, and it seems like a pretty big change could actually be coming to the playoff format in 2026. Jordan Bianchi won a door bumper clear last week and basically said it sounds like there might be only 3 rounds in the playoffs instead of 4 in 2026. And instead of having a 1-race championship next year, it sounds like it's going to be a 4-race championship instead of 1. It's going to be a 3-3-4 format. There has been a ton of questions on how they're going to sort out this format for the 2026 year and how many drivers exactly will get eliminated or how many drivers will move on. Well, according to what was talked about on Door Bumper Clear, it sounds like the championship round, instead of having a championship 4, it may be a championship 6 in 2026. I am going to be real and honest here. If they decide to go ahead and do this where they do go to a championship 6 instead of a championship 4, I am not a big fan of this move. You've already got major issues with having a championship 4 in NASCAR. I think a championship 6 is absolutely complicated. The other thing you have to look at as well is how are they going to have the seating? Are they going to eliminate 5 in each round? So say go from 16 to 11, then to 6. That make a little bit of sense, and while I think 4 races is definitely a better format, and I think a lot of people, and some people, especially full season fans, would be a little more happy with it because it will provide at least some more legitimacy. I think one of the big issues that you have to look at is the legitimacy factor. And I think, and we'll talk about Jeff Burton's comments here in just a second with the format and how like NBC doesn't have a big part of it, which I completely disagree on. But I think that you got to look at that because I think a lot of people want to see major changes. I think a lot of people love to see the 10-race chase come back. I think the 10-race chase would absolutely be the best way if you're going to have some sort of points format and some sort of championship to crown your champion in the sport. I think you need to have at least some sort of length of it. I think 4 races is better, but I don't think it's a big enough a sample size. I think there needs to be more than just 4 races for a championship in the sport, in my opinion. Maybe they try this out in the Truck Series first and then go Cup. That is a possibility considering the Truck Series has been a guinea pig, plus trucks really need something to change with how things have been going down in the Truck Series with the lack of coverage, among other things. I think that would be the best way to start it. But I think the biggest thing we need to talk about is who has control of the championship. We've heard from Jeff Gluck that a big reason why we haven't had a major change to the format, at least in recent years, is because TV plays a major role in that, and TV is the biggest reason why we haven't a major change in the format in the first place. Now, Jeff Burton, of course, was on a Door Bumper Clear, and he kind of defended NBC in a major way and said that NBC is not the one making decisions on the format. They help a little bit, but they don't make the full decisions on the format. Now, I do think that there is some truth to that, saying that NBC isn't the one making decisions on the format. I don't think that NBC is the one going to NASCAR and providing the format itself to NASCAR and saying, hey, this is exactly what we want. We're wanting you to basically win exactly what we want, and NASCAR has to comply at that point. I do agree with that a little bit. However, what I don't think Jeff Burton realizes is that we're not saying that NBC is the one who came up with the format. NASCAR is the one who came up with the format in 2013. But NBC has had the championship format now in the championship for over a decade at this point. And if they went to NASCAR and said that we can have a full season format or at least some sort of chase format, I think NASCAR would be down with it. I think NASCAR would be fine with it because TV pays so much money with it. I think that's something that Jeff Burton fails to realize is, yes, TV doesn't fully make the decisions, but I think that there is a lot of lying going on here, and I think Jeff Burton, of course, and big thing that needs to be noted here as well, is a lot of people are surprised by Jeff Burton's comments. I don't think anybody should be fully surprised because Jeff Burton works for NBC. So Jeff Burton is not going to bash his people that he's employed with at this point. He's not going to bash them. He's going to basically defend what they are doing. And I respect that he wants to defend him, right? I think we all can not disagree with that he's going to, no matter what, defend it. But I think we all can agree also that there has to be change. And I'm glad to see at least we're looking at getting rid of the one-race championship. That's a big positive change. That's a massive step in the right direction. Many in the industry completely understand that the one-race championship is not the best way to go about it. Now, I do agree with something Jeff Burton kind of said about having like the top 10 in the regular season, getting in the playoffs and being in no matter what. I completely agree with that. That's actually would be a step in the right direction because Chris Buescher should have been in. Mark Truex Jr. should have been in 2022. I think that absolutely should have happened. But I think we all can agree that there had to be major changes to the postseason going forward for the sport to head in a much better direction. And I really hope we do have playoff format changes and big ones coming really soon because I think there has to be some major changes coming really, really soon, hopefully. It sounds like we might be getting an announcement here very soon on that. NASCAR's indicated they're going to have a meeting here really soon on that. I think that meeting's happening next week, as a matter of fact. So we'll see what kind of stuff they come up with. But I think the legitimacy of this format needs to be changed, and I really hope the changes that do come can make the sport a lot better because, again, I think there's big changes that really need to be made for the legitimacy of the long-term future of the sport, and I hope those changes are made very soon so that the sport can be in a much better position, in my honest opinion. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're doing a little bit of a NASCAR silly season update. Now, there's a couple new things that have come out in regards to silly season for 2026. The first one, let's talk about Chris Wright. We've heard some rumors and speculation about Chris Wright maybe returning to NASCAR in 2026 after not really making any starts in NASCAR since getting fired from Our Motorsports in the middle of 2025. And then, of course, in the middle of the season, Our Motorsports shutting down and those owners' points from the 5 Our Motorsports team going over to Alpha Prime Racing for the remainder of the 2025 year, which we still don't know what that lineup is going to be yet for 2026 for Alpha Prime. According to Breakcard, it sounds like that Chris Wright may be returning to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series on a full-time basis next season. Now, what team could it be? Breakcard's mentioned one team, and that is McAnally Hilgeman Racing. I'll be real and honest. If it is McAnally Hilgeman Racing that he's going to end up with in 2026, this would be a really disappointing move. McAnally Hilgeman Racing is one, if not maybe the best team in the Craftsman Truck Series right now. They've won races with Tyler Ankrum. They've won a lot of races in the past to Christian Eckes, and Daniel Hemrick has been a championship contender in the Craftsman Truck Series this year. I think it would be a really bad move. He got moved to the 19 or got moved to the 18. We've also heard rumors of Hailie Deegan being linked over to McAnally Hilgeman Racing, which I don't know how to feel about that, to be honest. I think Deegan is a better driver than Chris Wright, but God, you're going to have a lot of things you're going to have to do when it comes to the body shop if Hailie Deegan, in fact, ends up over there and Chris Wright ends up over there as well. I just don't get this move. There's no disrespect to Chris Wright, but that guy just doesn't take accountability. We all remember they wrecked Josh Bilicki multiple times in the NASCAR Xfinity Series races at the start of the season and really took no accountability for it. I think there's going to be a lot of crashes, and I think these teams that hire some of these paid drivers do have to realize that people like Chris Wright being involved, you have a really good chance and possibility of a lot of crashes taking place and a lot of people not really having equipment that can survive, which I just, again, I just don't fully understand this move. I don't get why Chris Wright is being considered for a Truck Series seat at the moment. It doesn't make sense. I mean, they literally made a Chris Wright talent memorial on Google for crying out loud, how many times he crashed, and basically took Justin Allgaier out of a shot to win that race at Texas Motor Speedway. With no disrespect to Kyle Larson, but Justin Allgaier probably should have won that race and screwed a lot of drivers out of really good runs in 2026. So we'll see where he ends up heading next year. But again, everything I've heard is McAnally, and if he does end up there, I think that's going to be a really disappointing move from the McAnally team. They decided to bring a guy like Chris Wright, who is not a good driver, not the most talented, and someone who has struggled completely in the races he's entered. We'll see if he does end up there. The other big one is Kaulig Racing. Now, Kaulig Racing is, of course, they got their first chassis, which is a former Spire Motorsports chassis. We obviously know Spire is expected to sell some of their equipment over to the organization of Kaulig Racing next year. A lot of people wonder how does that make sense with Kaulig being a Ram team and Spire being a Chevy team. Well, a lot of the things are very similar. There's a lot of the composite bodies among other things, and there's some new changes coming to some of the regulations for the Truck Series in 2026. According to the NASCAR Rumor Massage account, there are 4 names that have been linked over to the Kaulig truck team for 2026. One of those, of course, is Brendan Butterbean Queen. Another one is Daniel Dye, 2 names we've heard of in recent months. But there's 2 other names that emerge as candidates as well. Some will say Lost Allen. Lost Allen, from what a lot of people are reporting, may have lost some funding and sponsorship and may not be racing altogether because he doesn't have any funding anymore. A lot of that is because he just isn't that great of a driver, and the companies work with may be in a little bit of trouble financially, which is the big reason why they may no longer be sponsoring him. But the other 2 names that have been linked are Cleetus McFarland and Tony Breidinger. Let's first begin by talking about all the drivers who are currently linked over there. First beginning with Brendan Butterbean Queen. Of the 4 drivers I mentioned, Brendan Butterby Queen is the driver who I have most confidence in being extremely successful with this team if he ends up over here. Brendan has been very good in the lower series. He has 6 wins in the ARCA Menards series so far this year and is very, very likely to win the ARCA championship in 2025 with 6 wins, having a pretty big lead in the championship, had a lot of top 5s, a lot of top 10s, and has been extremely consistent throughout the year on a week-by-week basis. I really believe that he will be very good in this truck, and I think he'll actually be a championship contender. He's made a couple truck series starts, looked really good at North Wilkesboro last year, had a top 5 truck and a race-winning truck at points in that event, finishing, I believe, 3rd or 4th in the event. He's looked all right in the other races, but not amazing. But of course, Spire has had some struggles so far this year. I think he'll be very good if he ends up over at the Kaulig Racing team next year. Daniel Dye is also the other name that hasn't surprised me. He's been another driver that's been linked over there. I think Daniel Dye is a talented driver, but I don't think he's really worked out fully in the Xfinity Series and after a really strong start this year. It's been kind of a downward spiral for the Kaulig Racing team, especially since they announced it at Daniel Dye's father's dealership. It would make a lot of sense to go ahead and put a guy like him in a full-time truck, and I think he actually will do pretty good with Kaulig. Say what you want to say about Daniel Dye, talented guy. I think he's got a lot of potential to be successful. Let's move on to talk about Tony Breidinger as the third name. This is a new one that I've not heard of, and this one is definitely a big surprise because she's working very closely with Toyota and has been with Toyota for quite some time. So this one surprises me a little bit, and I'm going to be honest, if she is chosen as one of the drivers for this program, I'm going to be very, very disappointed because while I think Tony Breidinger does a really good job bringing sponsorship to the table, she has been atrocious in the team. I know people criticize Hailie Deegan, and Hailie Deegan was, and I agree, was not very good in trucks. But Hailie Deegan had a lot more top 20s. I think she had 12 top 20s, something like that, in her full-time season a couple years ago in trucks. Tony Breidinger has 2 top 20 finishes. Her best finish is 18th. Keep in mind, her teammates have been a lot better. Gio Rogerio, who's a rookie this year, also contended for wins throughout the year but missed the playoffs. Tanner Gray had multiple top 5s, including a runner-up finish at Pocono. And Corey Heim has 8 wins so far this year. She's not going to be better at Kaulig than she's been this year with an organization like Tricon. Tricon's one of the better teams, and I get Tricon may not have the same consistent speed, but Corey Heim has been exceptional this year and has been very, very good. I think if she would end up over there, it would be a death blow to Kaulig Racing right from the get-go. You may not see as much destroy equipment. She doesn't destroy a lot of equipment out there, but she just runs so far off the place and is so slow and struggles. The only reason she's over there in the first place is not because of talent, but because she can bring a lot of sponsorship, it's in funny, to an organization and get them up to speed. So we'll see what happens with her, but I don't know if she'll even be there full-time at this point. The last driver, and a reason many of you clicked, Cleetus McFarland. Cleetus McFarland's name has been mentioned multiple times for the Kaulig Racing organization. I've heard that at least a couple times at this point that he's been linked over there. Now, if Cleetus McFarland does in fact end up over at Kaulig Racing next year, I do not expect him to be full-time because he's committed to a lot of different things. He, of course, did confirm he will be back next year. It sounds like it will be an ARCA next year for sure with Rhett Jones Racing, which is definitely a surprise. Not a surprising move. He's worked really closely with Rhett Jones, but Rhett Jones is not expected to switch over to Dodge. So they might be a 4-team, so could we see Cleetus maybe switch between different manufacturers? That would certainly be interesting for sure. But Cleetus McFarland, he wouldn't be a driver that I would start off as your full-time factory guy. I think Cleetus has shown potential, right? He's gotten a couple top 10s in ARCA, including a top 10 at Charlotte. We all, of course, saw what happened during one of the restarts at Charlotte Motor Speedway. But I think he would do at least a decent job. Do I think he'd do a great job? No, absolutely not in select events. But I don't think he'll be a full-time driver. Most likely, if he ends up over there next year, it will be in that all-star truck. That'd be the most likely potential there at this point. Outside of those drivers, I'm not exactly sure who else has been linked over there. Again, I mentioned Lois Allen. He is not a driver who I expect to go over there. Could we see someone like a Grant Enfinger go over there? He's not signed with CR7. He would not be a bad choice for that team to go over and drive for Kaulig. What about a guy, of course, like, I don't know, think about Daniel Hemrick. With rumors of Hailie Deegan going over to McAnally and Chris Wright as well, could we see a guy like him go over there and drive for Kaulig, considering he's made starts for them now in the Xfinity Series? I think that is actually a potential possibility as well. We're just going to have to kind of wait and see what happens in regards to Kaulig and what will happen with the team. But it's interesting, and Cleetus is mentioned as a possibility. We'll see where the team goes from there, and we'll see what drivers do pick up a guy like Cleetus and maybe even Tony Breidinger going into next year. We'll see how things work out. We'll see what happens with the team going forward in 2026. So, that is in today's Law NASCAR News and Motorsports News episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me to Facebook and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's get some more of that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. You think Cleetus will actually end up at Kaulig next year, at least on a part-time stint or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and more thoughts about a potential playoff format change, and what championship format would you like to see in the sport going forward? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If any major news breaks later today, we'll discuss it live on the channel. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing a video on Junior Motorsports talking about 10 potential drivers who could end up over the 88 car next year. Then, of course, on Saturday, we'll hopefully have the truck race review and Cup qualifying reactions. And then, of course, on Sunday, we'll have the starting lineup video for the Cup race at New Hampshire. And we'll also have the race review as well, the Monday we should have a NASCAR news video dropping. We got a lot of content coming on people like Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, Frankie Muniz, Kyle Larson, Chase Light, Ryan Preece, Casey Kane, Cleetus McFarland, Dodge, Ram, Connor, Zilisch, Junior Motorsports, Daniel Swartz, all the good stuff to talk about on the channel in the coming days and weeks as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, buddy.